Hi, I'm Isaac,
And I'm Faith.
and welcome to the We Didn't Plan This podcast. So, today we are talking about something a bit more existential. Okay, we're talking about optimism bias. So, I think now we really wanted to delve into the psychology of optimism and what makes us feel like we can always do more, or what stops us from doing more when we can. So I guess personality question on a scale of 1 to 10, like, the pain scale.
The pain
Yes,
scale.
the bigger pain scale, the face
happy
smiling.
face, sad face. How much of a sucker for suffering are we, right?
Exactly. How optimistic are you as a person? 1 to 10.
Okay,
And
so
justify.
wait, so is 1 being a pessimist and then 10 being an optimist?
Yes, you can rate it like that.
I think I'm like maybe a 5 or 6. I wouldn't say I'm strongly either way. Like I'm not a pessimist because I believe that I have a certain level of competence and like knowledge of myself to, not take on something that I know I'm 100% going to fail in, like skydiving or whatnot. But at the same time, I'm also cautiously optimistic, perhaps. Like I'm not blindly optimistic. Yeah.
So what makes you think you'll fail at skydiving?
Oh, I'm scared of heights and I do not believe in jumping out of planes. I feel like I might just go splat or the parachute might, fail. Yeah, so there are things that I'm pessimistic towards, but it's by choice. And everything else that could go well, I don't want to, you don't want to set your hopes up too high, right? Because you'll be super disappointed. So I have to set myself at a 5 or 6, solidly in the middle.
Solidly in the middle.
Yeah.
As we are taught in our medical training, you must always ask why 5 and not 4. Why 5 but not 6 or 7, right? So I like something you said just now, which is about believing that you have a minimum level of competence. I was wondering, when you think about competence, do you feel like it is competence when it comes to specific skills, and then therefore it allows you to, do things that further tap on that skill set? For example, practicing medicine, advancing your medical career further, or is it more personal? So thinking about the fact that, maybe you've achieved certain things, you trust in your ability to build relationships, try new things, go into new environments. I'm really curious. What does that mean for you?
I think it's a bit of both. So like you must have like enough hard skills to be sure that you can do something competently. So I mean, I cannot go in and say I'm gonna be a lawyer, I'm gonna, I don't know, be an engineer and dig an MRT tunnel today, because I don't have the skills for that. But knowing that I have skills in like medicine, I can be like, okay, I can probably stitch this thing fairly nicely, or I can probably do this medical adjacent thing with like decent competence. And in terms of soft skills also, it's about knowing your limits. So like, I feel like if I know I thrive well in this kind of environment, if I add this circumstance to a new scenario, it's like, okay, there's a decent chance of success. But if you put me into a different scenario, like for example, I really suck when I cannot survive when I'm sleep deprived. Like my functions and my like emotional regulation and like fatigue I just crash. So if like you put me in a scenario that's like that, I'll be like, okay, the chances of me succeeding are like not high, because I'm very pragmatic about like what my limitations are. Yeah, so how is it for you though, on a scale of 1 to 10?
So my non-serious answer to this is that I'm a 8 out of 10 optimist in the
Wow,
day, and 2 out of 10 optimist at night.
Okay, so 8 plus 2 equals 10, so you're 10 out of 10 optimist, I suppose.
I would say I
Right,
average
yeah.
out to a similar level,
So about a
because
6.
yeah, it's a weird mix for me where I feel like
Mm.
overall on a day-to-day, I'm very pessimistic about things. I worry a lot about how, each individual task goes, or with each individual endeavor. Let's say I'm working on a 2-month long project or business endeavor or something like that. I'm always thinking about whether every single thing that happens is like a symptom of potential failure. But then when I think back on a more macro level, every time I dive into something, generally those don't seem to be things that someone who is overall pessimistic would do. Like I've tried to cast my name into the mix in things that I feel difficult, but I suppose somewhere inside me I feel like I can do anyway. I guess when you're talking about sleep deprived, I think we all have been there. I don't know if we need to make a public apology to all the people who have talked to us at between the 4 to 5 a.m. hour.
Yeah, sorry. 4 to 5 a.m. if it's 0 hours of sleep, I'm just like, couldn't this have been a text? Like, why did you wake me up to order this?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when you say you're throwing your name into things, how much of it do you think is like ambition versus optimism, or is it a mix of both?
I feel like we all thrive on a mix of ambition, optimism, but also a bit of need
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. I think the time where I felt this the most was sometime in med school, where I decided I wanted to, start renting a place by myself outside. And then it was this whole very existential need of like, I need money, I need it now.
Yeah.
Right? Right. They're not cheap, by the way.
Yeah, the financial pressure, like, and you weren't really earning, right?
I
At that
wasn't.
moment.
I
Yeah.
did some very part-time one-off, hourly education stuff, but
Mm.
that wasn't by any means an income. So I think at that point I dived into it with that same mix that you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I thought that everything that could go wrong could go wrong. I sent out my CV and cover letter to a million different people asking for like weekend roles, nighttime roles. I was literally sitting Novena, this cafe, and I was scrolling through like what are some nighttime jobs I can get. I was like, can I be
Wow,
an ambulance
you were
driver?
juggling everything.
Yeah,
That's crazy. That's you're gonna go away.
I was looking like,
Wow.
yeah, can you be a overnight like something something, right?
And then the
So
next day you just go back to work and go back
yeah,
to school.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then at that moment, I decided it became this unholy mix of a few different roles. Like I managed to get this weekend relief teacher gig at one of the more well-known tutoring brands in Singapore. So it was just a Sunday thing, morning to night. But at least that was like quite a constant thing every month. And then I put that together with what I was already doing in education. So all those like one-off, one-to-one things. And then together with that, I found myself on I don't know if you've heard of the Homage app.
Wait, what services were you offering there?
I was a basic
Like,
caregiver, healthcare attendant.
oh,
So
wow.
yeah.
Wait, they just let you actually chose to do that.
I chose to do that because that was like one of the few freelance things I could think of that could fill the rest of the time. So
wow, so you're really hustling very hard.
it was hard. It was like a bit painful, but then that was the only one I found where I was like, actually, this is something beyond, I suppose. Like, okay, I can't commit to renting a car and being a Grab driver, right? That you really need to like make up for it. I couldn't. I wasn't that. I wanted to do something that was at least skill adjacent, or even if it wasn't lucrative per se, it could like build something.
It's just like experience and soft skills and some hard skills too.
Exactly. And then I just found myself like going to camp at people's houses overnight to wipe diapers and wipe floors when the diapers fail, if you know what I mean.
Oh my god, you've basically experienced like a nurse's job.
It was, I think it was. Wow. But that was a very temporary period. I really respect all my healthcare colleagues who do that
I feel
on
like
a day-to-day basis.
If every doctor goes through that, they will be like way nicer and more respectful to all the allied health and nursing staff.
Yes, absolutely. And it was, I think, like jumping into that, it felt like there was part of me that was very, very fatalistic, thinking about, oh my god, like, am I even going to pass the next year of med school if I have to do this all the time to even pay for my room? But then thinking back, if I didn't want to, or rather like if I didn't think that I had it somewhere in me to do it, I wouldn't have done it in the first place. So I think there was like part of me that just felt like doing something that felt very impossible, or at least felt very unknown, was at least in some way possible. And I think having come on the other side of that, I guess things turned out okay.
Yeah, it's like just having the courage to challenge yourself in this way.
Yeah.
And like to know that you won't break, it gives you more confidence for future challenges, right?
Exactly, which is something that we'll touch on later in another question. I have a very, very set of stories to talk about how we shift the bar from pessimism to optimism.
Yeah, I am interested to hear that. But I mean, talking about like medicine, looking back on our choice to go into medicine, do you think there was some like optimism bias there?
I think for sure. We always, I guess, hear a lot about what being in this career involves, right? Where I suppose, okay, obviously, you hear from a lot of people like, wow, congrats. Sorry, I sounded more sarcastic. I should be. Okay, but thank you to everyone who wishes us well. Okay. But I think we are all very aware, especially when you talk to other medical people, they warn you about this and that, the hours, the pay, the commitment, and all that. And I suppose you go into that. If you decide that you want to assume responsibility for that, no matter how young or immature you are, I suppose to some extent you need to believe that you have it in you somewhere. Did you feel like this when the thought of a medical career was in front of you, and where did that come from?
Yeah, I think there's so much like youthful idealism because at 18, I don't know, maybe you feel energetic. So when I remember when I was doing job shadowing in Tan Tock Seng when I was in JC, all the HOs and MOs, the house officers, medical officers were like, oh, are you sure you want to do medicine? Maybe don't think twice. The hours are horrible. We're working like so many hours a week. I'm on call. I haven't gone home in like 30 hours. And then they really tried to scare us off, like all the med students. They would tell us how bad it is. And then the senior doctors would say it's a tough job, but the sacrifice could be worth it. And they're like, it's very meaningful. So I mean, we really did see both sides. So like weighing that, of course, like if you're an optimistic 18-year-old who's like, I've been trying to do this my whole life, of course you're gonna just tune out the bad stuff, or like tell yourself that this bad stuff is surmountable since they're like these people are alive and talking to you about it. So you believe you can do it, and you go in with that hope until you're like 20 something, and then you're put through like a 30-hour call, and you're like, oh crap, my body can't take this anymore. Yeah, like maybe I should not have been so optimistic, but even then you just continue being optimistic because there's no choice. If you fall into like a pessimistic spiral, it's just like you're just going to get more miserable where you are. So I guess we have no choice but to be optimistic.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that because it's like, especially when you're doing it, you feel like you have the easiest way through is a little bit of self-gaslighting.
Yeah, for sure. And Stockholm syndrome.
I think we all get very good and this doesn't just apply to our career. I think
Yeah, I think a lot of other industries too.
yeah,
Right?
we've seen. I know. I think most of my friends are definitely around the same age, which also means that we are all at the same age of our careers where we have born enough of it to be a little bit tired.
Yeah,
But then the true fruits of it are some way away.
yeah.
But I think somehow, like growing up next to all these good people, you realize that actually everyone is quite good at this. One of my very best friends, he used to be what I always remember him to be is like he will always be that guy in class who sleeps on the sofa behind reading his anime.
Wow,
And
chill
it's
guy.
like I'll be studying, even like when I'm studying, he'll just be sleeping and then we'll wake up and then go eat lunch together, right? But then I'm pretty sure he pulls longer hours than me right now. And he has been doing that consistently for the past 3 years. And then it just like surprises me the amount of resilience, and I don't even think it's like deliberate resilience, it's like just this is
no
normal
choice.
now
Yeah.
and we just do it,
Yeah,
right?
like the this is fine the dog meme, right?
Exactly. But I think with the idea of optimism, then you hear all these bad things about the career, and I suppose mediating optimism and pessimism is also the idea of protective factors, right? And then you kind of have to lay them out on the table on display. And I suppose some of those things for me were thinking that, okay, I think I have a decent social support infrastructure to know that there's someone out there in this world who, if I really crash out and need to be on the sofa somewhere to be depressed for a month or two, someone will be there. To know that at the end of the day, I can still, or at least I will not mind looking for a bottom of the barrel job, whatever that might be, and just pick up the pieces again. And I suppose those protective factors, as well as the longer term vision that, okay, maybe this career will give me something someday, if you just don't fall out the bottom. I guess some of those things are protective as well. But then it does vary for some people. I don't know if you've met any, colleagues or peers who you feel were much less optimistic despite having much more protective factors, or were there colleagues who have much higher levels of optimism with much less protective factors? I feel like there's so much diversity you see along.
I feel like there's a lot more of the latter. Like people, actually, I would say there's an even mix. But when you mention someone who's like really optimistic, there was one of my co-house officers. Oh my goodness, she was an absolute saint. Like you can have nurses texting you and like everyone asking you for so many things at once, and you're like, wait, stop! I need to do this first, or like you say, pause. I need to have lunch. But she was always like, yes, come, let me help you. And then after she was done accepting all the requests and doing the requests, she would go and help other people too, like her fellow house officers, or she'd go and talk to the patients. I was like, oh my gosh, is she like Mother Teresa or something? Like, and no one had ever seen her like be annoyed or express fatigue or say anything negative about like anyone or about the job. I was like, oh my gosh, we should all strive to be more like her, even though it seems like the rest of us are like weak humans and she's some goddess. Yeah, we were like, how is she so optimistic in a system that is kind of designed to wear us down and break us down. And how do we embody more of those positive traits? Even though like on some days we're like, I don't want to show up. But she was always like, I'm still showing up, I'm happy and genuinely happy. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's crazy to see the number of external and internal factors that can control this. You know, I've seen, I don't know, surgical people who are mid-career, right? And then, you know, their schedules are notoriously demanding.
Yeah, like staying
And
3 days a week in
yeah.
hospital, right? Because they're on call and then you don't go home until really late and then you just decide to sleep over in hospital and work some more.
Yeah, they have like, I mean, we think 30-hour shifts are bad. Some of them
They do
pull
like
more
72
than
hours,
that.
right? At least I heard.
Exactly. When they're like, you know, registrars or whatever, right? And then you realize that there's so many factors that come into play. You know, some of them, they might be, I don't know, in their early 30s, but then if they need to go home, their parents fetch them and then wash their clothes for them. And then, you know, there are these external things that actually are going on behind the scenes.
More comfortable in some ways.
Correct. And then at the same time, you see people who totally don't have any of these. You have, especially people who move from abroad, graduate from other countries, and then they have been doing this entirely by themselves the whole time, navigating a system that is not very friendly, striking out their careers, and somehow they're fine with it. So it's so internal as well. So it's like you just never know what drives the optimism. And
yeah, like where is it coming from, and are they genuinely happy, or is it delusional optimism? But I guess I don't know. Isn't all optimism the same after a while, as long as it gets you where you need to be?
Right, it's about the functional purpose of the optimism,
right? Just means to an end.
Yeah, I mean, I felt a lot of times where you feel like you have no, like what you said just now, you have no choice but to be optimistic.
Yeah,
Because
if you, I mean, if not, you end up in this really pessimistic spiral, which I mean, I'm sure like you and your fellow house officers have also gone down, right? Like everyone just sits around in a little bitching circle, and everyone just is like, oh, this thing is going wrong for me. Oh, this thing is going worse for me, and then you just try and like compare until everyone's equally depressed. Yeah,
it's true. I mean, I think the community always really helps with that, and it really matters how many people you have to trauma bond or to like overtly support you. I mean, I came from a rotation a few months ago where we had some somewhat negative experiences, and I think one thing that really united us was like making hypothetical formal complaints in our heads. And then they okay, like let's like diary down all these things that are happening, right? And then I mean they never come to fruition because you just move on with life. Time does heal, for lack of a, you know, sometimes you wish it did, sometimes you wish it didn't, but then time heals and then you move on. But in that moment, that community really helps, right? And I think, you know, on the topic of shared experiences, you know a lot about that because you've had a bit of a community around you ever since your med school days. This is the I'm referring to the blog that you've been writing all the way since, I don't know, when was it? First year of medical school. So how was that experience? Like, do you start out hoping that the blog would become something, or what was that brand of optimism for you when you created that whole thing?
I don't know. I never went into it thinking it would actually become anything close to what it has become today. I just wrote it to, you know, let people know what they're getting themselves into, you know, to like maybe stop them from being so optimistic. Maybe it was part of me that was regretting like, oh, why was I so optimistic when I went in? I need to tell people what's going on the inside so that they go in with, you know, a heavy dose of realism, and if they do, you know, it's up to them. And then I guess over the years as I started writing more, suddenly things snowballed. People heard about like my blog, reached out to me, and then I found like, you know, external support factors to like motivate me to continue writing. Like I guess if there had been no one reaching out and no response, the blog would have died. But because I still like, I mean, even a few days ago, I got like a message from a medical officer who was like complaining about his like department, telling me what horrible hours he was working, and he was asking about avenues outside. And so I was actually really happy that I was able to provide that kind of support and community, and, you know, be the source of optimism for someone else, to tell them that, hey, there's hope outside. Just stay strong and stay alive. Yeah.
And do you feel like that the evolving nature of your optimism has come through in the way that you write and in the messages that you put across? Because I think this has been writing that has seen you through so many years and life stages, right? This is probably, if you started in first year medical school, that means it's like what, almost 10 years already?
2021. Yes, I mean, I started writing like regular blog posts in 2021. 2016 was when I first started. That one was more toned down. And then in 2021, it became like a coping mechanism. Like, it became a source of optimism in a way. Like, if I could at least write my feelings out and write them out in the world, there's a chance that someone else could be out there and feel validated by it, or validate me also by saying that they've had a same experience. So it's all about just staying alive and keeping the hope for everyone and myself.
So it does feel like when you actually take your experiences and put them on a piece of paper without putting any value judgment on them, that almost always makes you more optimistic rather than less optimistic.
Yeah, because I mean, if you write all about negative stuff, no one's going to really want to read it. And I mean, it just doesn't reflect well on my own mental like well-being if I'm like was just complaining or being angry online. Yeah, so I guess writing about things optimistically also just rewires your brain to become happier and to focus on the positives rather than like, I mean, there could be an equal number of positives and negatives. But if you just focus on the negatives, then you're really going to feel shitty. Like, I mean, that happened to me for like a couple of months during housemanship at first. Then I was like, okay, reframe, just think about the positive stuff and focus on that, and give people strength too.
And I mean, when it comes to fixating, right? I think that whole process carries on as you suffer and as you know, when things become better, then you recalibrate. When things become worse, you recalibrate. At the very start, I think it also, every time we go into something new, right, new phase of our career, there's also this process of you at least set expectations for yourself. And sometimes you realize you've overestimated or underestimated, right? Do you think at any point there's been things that you've really underestimated? And if so, like, in what way, you feel like you underestimated how much time it'll take, you underestimated the emotional toll it'll have on you, or what? Has there been times like that?
I think for me, my answer for this is probably not as exciting as yours. For me, the thing that comes out the top of my mind is I underestimated my ability to survive on like zero sleep. Turns out I genuinely cannot survive on anything less than maybe 7 hours of sleep. I am barely functional. So yeah, I guess that's why I decided that hospital life was not something for me long term. Yeah, but how is it for you?
I feel like the biggest thing I've always underestimated is emotional and time bandwidth, because theoretically you tell yourself, oh, you can reply messages on the train, you can walk home while reviewing a PDF of something, you can study while you eat. Theoretically it can all happen. But then when it comes to it, like at the end of a long day, you're just so exhausted. So 2 nights ago I got home at 7 p.m. Not too bad.
Yeah.
It was a Thursday and I took a nap. It was supposed to be a 30-minute nap. I napped for 2 hours. So I woke up, I ate dinner. I went straight back to sleep all the way until the next morning. My work band told me like it was the best night of sleep I've had in the last 2 months.
You see, I mean, that's a win in itself.
It's a win. But I think the larger point is that, it feels that every time you take on something new, you feel like, okay, theoretically, you can fit it in your schedule. There's like this meme with the that thing and the whole house on fire, right?
Yes.
And I think a lot of times, when I started my business, when I've taken on more things, be it even in the volunteering and community space, you always feel like, okay, this excites me. I want to try it out. And then when it comes into the reality of it, right, you start knowing yourself so much better. You realize that, okay, like for myself, I feel, and this is a big apology to everyone who I've taken 48 hours to reply, I have this huge amount of inertia when it comes to replying a text, especially when I'm at the lowest bandwidth. It's like I just am so exhausted by the thought of replies, sending something that another person will see.
Honestly, relatable, yeah.
Right?
Yes. I have also avoided like replying text sometimes because I'm just like, oh, it's too tiring. I'll do it another day, and then another day becomes like a week. And then by that time, it's too pricey to reply.
Exactly. And as you go through life, you kind of realize the different forms it takes. Where, I think when I was much younger, a part of me felt that, okay, last time in school, you do so many things, right? You have, I remember that used to be like, the routine would be like, okay, you go to school, before that you have training, and after you go to school, and then there's training after school, and then you go home, and then you study for your test, and then sometimes you do stuff for your other CCA, and then after that,
you somehow juggle it all, right?
And then it's like, fine, so you tell yourself, okay, sure, like, when I'm an adult, I can do the same. But whether it's with age or whether it's because each of these things now comes with more gravity, right? Like, you can't just tell your colleagues when you're on call, like, yeah, go ahead and serve the medicine without really thinking. You can't exactly do that reflexively, can you? So So then the fatigue really weighs, and I think that's something that I'm still slowly coming to terms with myself.
Like our limitations, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, outside of sleep and all the other lifestyle factors, after leaving the system, do you feel like you've gotten a lot more bandwidth back, and how has that affected your general sense of optimism?
Oh, ironically, I think I probably become more optimistic because being out of the system means I can, fix my schedule however I want to. I can get my 8 hours of sleep, and I can still make time for friends and families and all the other supportive factors like exercise, travel. Yeah, and so using all that extra optimism, it makes me want to channel it into new creative projects. So I mean, like even this podcast that we came up with, it was because I had the bandwidth and you were willing to let me drag you along with this. And then like I mean working on like more writing and even YouTube and everything. I feel like it wouldn't have been possible if I'm okay, I mean number one, if I wasn't some stupid optimist. And number two, if I didn't have like the bandwidth and energy. Yeah. What's that for you though?
I feel like optimism kind of manifests both from difficult and from easy times for me. I think one of the questions we were thinking of answering before this is, does going through hard things all over and over again, right? Does it make you more or less optimistic, or like what do you come out at the other side of it? I think I totally agree that when I have 7 hours of sleep, I am the biggest optimist in the world. Like I feel
Yes.
like I can conquer the world with
Yeah, it's like
nothing
there's
but my
sunshine and
yeah,
blessings everywhere, right?
like the minute it hits 7 hours, right, it's like just me and my mocha frap against the
Yeah,
wall, you
yeah, you're
know.
so happy.
But then there's this weird relationship with hard times as well, where it's every time I go through something that feels difficult, you manage to delude yourself into feeling like, okay, at the start of this thing, it felt like it was impossible. It was not in fact impossible, and therefore in future, if I feel like there's something impossible, I should just do it.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like
like
this.
resilience, right? We are building
Yeah,
resilience and confidence in your own abilities.
yeah, and then like you conveniently decide to omit all the actual individual variables and circumstances.
Yeah.
You just tell yourself that was hard and now it isn't, so therefore anything in future that's hard should not be hard.
Wait,
Right?
is it just me, or like when you go through something tough, do you suddenly like after the end, after you reach the happy success point, you forget all the bad stuff when that happened?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's okay. So it's not
Absolutely.
just me, right? Because I
Yeah.
feel like there's so many times that we've gone through tough, like we've pushed through tough things, and when we were going through it, we were like, I'm never gonna do this again. And then suddenly when you're on the other side, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah,
Right? Okay, I mean, like
absolutely.
honestly,
Absolutely.
people who have like multiple kids, like they're like cursing and swearing during childbirth, like we've seen it. And then suddenly when they see the baby, like, oh, so cute, I want a second one.
Yeah.
And then a few months later, they come back with a second kid, and they're like, oh my.
Just a year later.
Yeah.
Just a year later. I think one of the formative experiences for me was definitely, I think sports was like quite a big role, played quite a big role for me in that. I remember when I was in CCA in secondary school, I suppose, we would have to do this. I was in canoeing, so we used to have this thing where we would, especially in the holidays, we would get put through a much harder session because you go to sleep after that, right? So the
Yeah.
coach will give you something like, okay, like let's do 60 sets of 1 minute sprints. Okay, like imagine kind of like doing that, but then running or like on a bike or something like that. It's
That's
kind
like
of,
high rocks on steroids.
it sounds awful, and it was awful, and then you feel like you have this immense set of dread before the timer goes off, right? And then at some point, somewhere in the middle, you're just in this weird pain cave where you're not registering, like the number just goes 32, 33, 34.
Yeah, and then you're riding on the adrenaline already.
Yeah, and then like you finish the whole thing, and then you go take a nap, and you're like, okay, like I'm 15, like as we all do, like, okay, come, I go play pool with my friends now, and it's like that kind of thinking stays with you, I suppose, into adulthood, where you feel, okay, there's this difficult thing, I have another long shift, I no idea what I'm doing, this is a new posting, but whatever, the sun will rise, right? And then the sun in fact rises, and then you go on to welcome another difficult, terrible day. I don't know if that's relatable.
No, honestly, it's true. It's like we just reset our memories sometimes. And it's just like, okay, I'll forget the hard feelings of the past, just focus on the good things and look forward to like the end of the call maybe. And like, I mean, it's optimism in the front and the back, I guess. Like you look forward and you're like, okay, I've got maybe a nice brunch or something after finishing this terrible call. Or like you look back and you're like, okay, I've got all these protective factors at home. that are like constant throughout my life. So I'll be good. I'm okay.
Right.
I can like handle this without crashing out.
I'm a really bad like on call stress eater. I've
Oh,
had
how many kg have you gained?
thankfully it's like net
Okay.
net neutral. I do remember one of my coping mechanisms or one of my worst calls was that okay, I think even on that really bad one, you reach this weird witching hour at 4 to 5 where there's not a lot going on.
Yes, yes.
Right. Like I think most people have this common experience.
Yeah.
Right? And then I was like, I just want something nice to eat right now. So I went on my Grab and I found that there's this stall that sells chicken cutlet carbonara and it was open 24 hours.
That is incredibly niche. People normally just go to 7-Eleven.
Yeah,
You're
no, I was like,
bougie.
it's time to get ambitious. So this Western hawker stall somewhere, God bless you, XR Western. They have like salted egg, like everything looks super sinful, and it was like
comfort food and wow, at 4
at 5 a.m.
perfect.
I'm gonna eat carbonara for breakfast today, and I did it, and it was the best feeling ever. Like,
No, I am glad that you actually managed to get to eat it. I was worried there'd be some plot twist like, oh, suddenly you got called for emergency or something.
yeah,
So
right.
you made it to
Happy
the end of the
endings.
night. Yeah.
Happy endings. But I guess this brings up one of the more meta questions, right? Which is optimism in the medical field, because I think we see a lot of literature about how when we see our patients go through certain things, right? And sometimes this is very human. You see that your brother got a heart attack or your sister got a stroke and you're doing the exact same things as them, but it's just not your turn. And somehow there's always this sense of, exceptionalism where you feel like, oh, it's not going to happen to you.
Yeah.
Do you see that a lot in your work? And the second interesting question is, do you ever feel like us as the givers of that advice also sometimes pretend that we are the exceptions to the norm when we eat our carbonaras at 5 a.m.?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess optimism bias in like healthcare, and I mean in terms of our patients, will be more of them overestimating their health outcomes, I guess, like based on what like we've advised them on. So like for example, sometimes there's patients who come in for health screenings. So like maybe 1 year then their cholesterol is like really high, and then the next year is a bit less high. And then they're like, oh doctor, does this mean I can like just take off my meds and like not take my meds anymore? So I mean they get like complacent, I suppose. They get overly optimistic. I mean it's good that they have hope towards their health and still care about it, but at the same time I'm like you can't have that much hope that like your body is gonna miraculously not go back to the way it is just because you take yourself off your medicine. Yeah, so most of the time I have to be like, okay, good job, keep it up and continue taking your medicines. Don't just like stop it because you're too optimistic right now. Yeah.
And I think this applies to so many other aspects of our life as well, right? Where I think one of my core experiences was when I got my personal trainer cert like many years ago. And then, we were taught about a bit of exercise planning and then, how do you plan workouts for the clients. And then one thing that really stuck was that the instructor was, I asked the instructor, so actually like out of these different ways of planning your workouts, whatever, 3 times, 4 times, space in cardio and strength or whatever, what is the best routine, or like what's the most optimal one? And his answer was, the best one is the one that they can follow. Right?
Yeah, the one you can stick to.
And it doesn't just apply to medicine, it applies to all these other aspects of lifestyle. And I know, having been in the longevity space for a little bit, do you have a silver bullet to our innate inability to stick with things that are good for us?
Honestly, okay, I guess back to the topic of optimism, is you have to have a bit of blind optimism that if you stick to this thing, if you commit to it, you will magically get better. Like if you work, like if you go to the gym twice a week, your long-term health will get better, even though you can't actually quantify it for sure. You can't be sure if you get hit by a car before that, or you like get a random cancer which you can't control before that. But I think it's just the notion of optimism that keeps people motivated to following health plans, taking supplements, or like going for screenings and stuff. Yeah.
And I feel like when you talk to patients, there's always that sweet spot in the middle, right? You cannot be so fatalistic where a lot of them will feel like everything is pointless.
Yeah.
So I might as well not try.
You might as well just eat like
right,
rice
yeah.
and laksa and coke.
Exactly.
And just die or something.
And then there's the other end, which is the blindly optimistic, like, okay, I just had a heart attack. Can I, and there's the stand got put in yesterday. Can I go to the smoking corner?
Yeah, right? Can I smoke? Can I like not
Yeah.
take my medicines for like a couple of days on vacation?
Exactly. So I guess, like whether it's medical or otherwise, it's this weird balance that we all
Yeah.
strike, whether it's our health, whether it's our career trajectories or otherwise. So I guess if we draw it back to the present and have a few final questions for us as individuals, right? Is there anything you're being optimistic about right now, today?
Mm, I guess right now I'm sort of working on like my book, which is just an extension of my blog. So I think I'm being a bit optimistic in that it will be well received, that it'll be able to, touch lives or be relatable to people. But I mean, I guess it's just part of the process. You have to have optimism. If not, why are you writing this, or why are you trying to put this message out into the world? Yeah, but I mean, we'll see how it goes. But what about you? You've got so many side projects going on. What are you being over optimistic or optimistic about?
So one of the things I'm being over optimistic about, and I get to be over optimistic because I'm being optimistic on someone else's behalf, which
Okay,
is that
agree.
one of our newer business milestones is
Mm.
my partner is going to spend the next month in Shanghai to
Oh,
grow the business over there.
that's
I'm
exciting.
entirely relying on him for obvious reasons. And why I have blind optimism is that I know that he's someone who just breaks down doors and asks questions that you think shouldn't be asked and talks to people that you think will never get talked to. And I suppose that also tells me, reflectively, that it's easier to be optimistic when someone else is doing a lot of the work.
And it's okay, it's inspiration.
It's inspiration,
Yeah.
exactly. And but at the same time, you find these things, you go back onto your track records and you feel that, okay, you've done it before, so why not you do it again? To quote a National Day song from I don't know how many years ago.
Yeah.
I think there was that
Yes,
there was that
of course.
post-COVID one, right? Very heartwarming music video. But and I guess, it sounds like we're both kind of optimistic.
Yeah. I think we are.
If we could calibrate it up or down, would you? And in which direction?
I think I would definitely down my optimism up, because I mean that's the way to keep life exciting and fresh, right? Like if you're not constantly striving towards something else that's more ambitious, that requires more hope to execute and push towards. Like, what are we living life for? I mean, why stagnate? We're too young for stagnation. So yeah, let's just be hopeless optimists. Dilulu is the Sululu, right?
Yeah, as they
Yeah.
say,
Yeah, as the wise ones say.
as the wise ones say. Yeah,
What
no,
about you?
I completely agree. I think I need a bit more blind optimism right now
Yes.
to make up for the lack of hours of sleep and to functionally make me operate more.
Yeah.
Because every time I look at my WhatsApp and I try to drag myself to reply, there's this sense of fatalism, like it's not gonna matter. Let me just pick it up tomorrow. It's not urgent. But the optimism serves as a cure. The optimism serves as a driver. The optimism is good for a lot of things,
Yeah.
right? And I suppose as long as you rein it in with enough realism, and I would love to bounce this question off someone else who's maybe too optimistic and see how they might want to rein it in. But yeah, I think it's just all of our individual journeys to walk, and we see how we can utilize it, weaponize it, eat it for breakfast, just like our chicken cutlets.
Yep.
And wishing everyone an optimistic week and weekend as well.
Yep, stay alive.
So that's all for today.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.